Hello, welcome to the Conscious Community Podcast, brought to you by Conscious Community Magazine. Today we're talking to Ian Simkins about his project Beauty in the Common and his experiences. Welcome, Ian, to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Do you want to just tell us about Beauty in the Common? How about you want to start by telling us about where you came up with the idea and what all the different parts are, including you have a magazine now, you have a website, you have songs, you walk through the whole year. Would you like to tell our listeners about what that project is?
Yeah, absolutely. So for a couple of years, we were hosting these songwriter gatherings at my house. Lived in this farmhouse out in the burbs, which is weird enough to begin with. So we figured, why not utilize that space and create an opportunity for different creatives from around the area to sort of, share whether it was spoken word or songs or fine art or poetry. And we would come up with different themes for each night. So one night we'd have the theme would be heritage, and people would write songs about their family of origin or create artwork about the country that they came from, and meeting with our leadership team, kind of just sharing some stuff that I'd been reading in the book of Genesis and some other stuff, other artists and poets that I'd been kind of learning from. And I was really interested in this idea of the beauty of things that are so easily overlooked, kind of our obsession with mountaintop experiences and sort of what happens in all of that valley time that most of us live in, like 99% of the time. And so I kind of shared with them, I said, I'm really interested in kind of exploring this idea of beauty in the common. And one of my buddies at the table was like, did you just come up with that? Whose phrase is that? I was like, I think it's mine. And then another buddy had his phone out. He's like, the domain's available. You should buy the website. And I was like, whoa, okay, hold on. I don't I'm just processing out loud this idea, this thing that I've been kind of, reading about a bit. And that next week, my alma mater, Judson University in Elgin, Illinois, invited me to come out and speak for a week-long series of chapels. And they said, "Do you have any themes, any ideas that you're kind of wrestling through? We're sort of open for themes this year." And so I kind of shared with them a little expanded version of this kind of beauty in the common idea. And to their credit, they're like, "We love it. We'd love to help support you in that. Let's do it." So part of what I had proposed to them for that week-long series of chapels, I said, how about instead of me teaching for 30-35 minutes, what if I just teach for 10, and then we have like songwriters and poets and painters and dancers? Let's create a different kind of experience. And at first they were like, no, we just rather would have you teach. But the more we kind of talked about it, the more open to the idea they became. So what we did was, because it was 5 chapels, we kind of framed it in a bit of a binary structure. So each day I would tackle 2 sides of sort of the same coin. So the first day was, beauty in community and beauty in solitude. And the next day would be beauty in chaos, beauty in stillness. And so I invited just friends from the area that I knew, to write original songs based on those themes. I just assigned them each a different theme, and they created these incredible songs. So we had this 5-day experience, and so now we had these 10 songs. And when we were done, that was kind of it in my mind. But all of these artists were like, so what's next? What are we doing now? I was like, that was kind of it for me. I didn't really think past this. And so Jeremiah was one of the songwriters, actually ran a studio in Naperville, and so let's capture these songs. And a bunch of the Judson students have been studying film, and they're like, yeah, we could film these songs too. We can create a whole kind of collection of these things. And I was like, okay, sure. So a little while later, we booked this studio day at this really killer place called Place in the Trees in Naperville. And my buddy Jeremiah and Matt, and we, from 8 a.m. to midnight, recorded those 10 artists plus an additional 5. So we recorded their song, and then we interviewed them about the process and what the songs meant and how they got there, and that whatever kind of word imagery they used, just kind of getting the peek behind the curtain of the creative process. But still, it was a crazy marathon of a day, and we shared meals together, and we recorded these songs, but we still didn't know exactly why, what we were gonna do with them. And so that's when we kind of dreamt up this project called The Common Year, And so what the common year is, I've been reading about like the earliest church gatherings and what those times actually looked like. And this one scholar was talking about the components that were present in every one of those gatherings was word, time, music, meal, and prayer. And so we developed a sort of like year-long experience based on those 5. So at the beginning of each month, we would release a song written by one of these artists, with a particular theme, beauty in solitude or beauty in chaos. And then each week, we'd release a different, what we call a narrative, just written by friends and family based on that kind of structure of 5. So the word component would be kind of the devotional component, but then what do you actually do with it? That's the time component. What's a meal that we could, share and make together that kind of corresponds? And so we had Catholic and Protestant and agnostic writers projects. So now a couple of years later, it's sort of become this really like beautiful collection of like really eclectic like thinkers and writers and artists and poets. And it's been really wild. It's become a whole lot more than I think what any of us ever anticipated it would be.
What I really think is interesting about it, and you mentioned it in there, it's like a return to like the idea of a liturgical year, or even before the church, the wheel of the year, the idea of we see our lives as moving through time. And I think that is something that is really missing. And you miss so much of the beauty in life when you don't stop and you think, this is this moment, this is now, this is life happening right now.
Right. Right. Well, and a lot of the idea for beauty specifically came from the Catholic Church. Actually, historically, has had what they called the transcendentals, and that was drawing from a lot of Plato's writing. That these transcendentals, or the present form above all forms, and so what the Catholic Church had kind of boiled down were 3 transcendentals: truth, goodness, and beauty. So, truth is sort of that's your doctrine piece. That a lot of churches they talk a lot about doctrine. Your goodness, that's sort of your ethics, your moral piece, like you should live, as good people. But then this beauty component, particularly in like my evangelical tradition, like no one ever talked about. No one ever really, beauty had sort of been forgotten. We talked a lot about good doctrine and living as good people, but the thing that I really loved about beauty, and we say this in a lot of what we write and do, is that rather than trying to convince people, we're wanting to invite them. And that sort of convince-invite dichotomy has been really helpful because I think, I don't know, in a culture that seems to be like growingly disenfranchised by like truth and moral claims, I think it's really hungry for someone to say, just come experience this with us. Come be a part of this. And beauty has a way, I think, of drawing out of us or moving us in a way that, simply arguing doctrinal or political views just simply can't. And that's kind of been the lifeblood of the whole thing, which is why we've been able to actually have various different writers from pretty different backgrounds, because it's not about furthering some brand. It's not owned by some church or denomination. It's all about all of us. Like, what would our lives look like if we actually were intentional about being captivated, about finding like wonder and awe in the everydayness of our life. And the thing that was really intentional about the word common is that common doesn't really mean ordinary. It also means, like shared, like finding more common ground with the people that we interact with, like starting first with what unites us, right? What do we already have that's similar? What if we started there and offered people opportunities to actually experience wonder and awe in the everydayness of their lives? And we found that to just be really, really powerful. I think more so than we really thought that it would be.
I think it's just interesting. It popped in my mind. You brought up the word common and then the word unity, and think of the word community as like the common people coming together.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So you've now moved into the different formats with this project. I think it's interesting that you've gone from online to print versus lots of other things are going from print to online. Is there a reason why you've deliberately chosen to do that now?
Yeah, I gotta give so much props to the team of people that have kind of helped make this thing like come alive, because they're always the one, like when I'm talking about what I think we could do for the next year or whatever, they're always the ones that are like, yeah, you need to dream bigger. Like you need to, they're always like, I'm so blown away by their willingness to take on more, to push the envelope, to expand. Like it blows my mind. Cause like we haven't monetized anything other than the magazine so far. And so it's just like really volunteering their time. So every time they're like, yeah, you should dream bigger, I'm just always kind of blown away. And I think one of the things that we really wrestled with was that part of what made this like so powerful was that people were doing it together. Like I was learning that like there were churches that were using these weekly narratives like as part of their liturgies. Like it was really surprising. I was really kind of blown away about the different ways that people were using this content. And so part of what I think the magazine discussion, there was this really good friend, Molly, who's this brilliant designer, and then our friend Becca for the project since the beginning, just had this desire to like move this digital experience into some sort of like physical space and time, that there was some value to actually like holding pages, to actually seeing something, holding something, marking it up, taking notes, like having it actually present in that kind of regard was a venture that really was like their brainchild. Like I don't even think I had the guts to even think up an idea like that. So when they approached me, like, hey, we'd like to design a magazine. What do you think? I'm like, that would be incredible. Yeah, go for it. So a lot of that desire, I think, is to bring back to kind of the center of this narrative the need for like the physical commonality. And it's so much easier now than even 5 years ago to launch into fights and arguments via social media, because we still have a lot of, I think, safety from the distance we feel in those mediums. And to invite people, as we have been, to share meals together, be intentional with time. Part of the expression of the magazine was we have a need to bring back to the physical space, sort of sanctifying. How do we actually remind ourselves that like this moment here and now is sacred, and it's not just this Sunday morning experience and then you just have the rest of life, but it's like no, all of this. There is no sacred secular divide, and if we can create a publication that helps people experience that more fully, or someone that maybe doesn't exist on social media, like how do we actually engage someone that way? I think that was a lot of their heartbeat, and it was just a fun, different format to kind of explore. There's some different principles when it comes to designing something in print than something that exists solely online, and I think they did an absolutely brilliant job putting it together.
I listen to all kinds of podcasts and read a bunch of stuff. One of my favorites is Sam Harris. They call him one of the four horsemen of new atheism. And he's actually, his more recent thinking and writing has been where he's been embracing like mindfulness and meditation. And
that's right.
If anything, for somebody who championed, atheism as a philosophy, and that this has become like a very widespread movement, I think he's, if anything, drifting back the other direction. He's kind of coming from atheism towards spirituality, and I think that this is a very interesting time, because that seems like a really hopeful thing to me, because I think it's not really truth if it isn't scientifically true, and it's not really at the same time, like if you just categorically reject everything spiritual as silly superstition, I think you're missing out on a huge part of the human experience. And there's a whole realm of things that we may not be able to prove or disprove, but that doesn't necessarily make them not an important part of what it means to be alive. And I think there's a lot of people in the new atheist movement who had really negative experiences within the church or within various religious upbringings. They had a very strong disciplinarian, upbringing in a religious household, and their way of rebelling against it and reacting to it is to go hard the other direction. I've seen the same thing with young people in like Satanism, where it's like, what is the most extreme tack I can take that's the opposite of what I was told as a kid. So I'm just gonna. It's not necessarily that that's true. It's that they want to just do the exact opposite of what they were told to do when they were young, and they hate that so much. Some of this stuff that you're doing sounds really exciting, but it's also, I wonder how you can get those people to the table too, and part of that discussion, because they are so, as long as you're putting it in kind of a church context, they're gonna reject it. And specifically the scientific community, I have friends who are scientists, and they really regard religion as some kind of backwards, vestigial human thing that is just, it has to be gotten rid of at all costs, because that's the thing that's holding us back, and that's the cause of all evil in the world. And so I would, from what Janae has told me about your project, I think it's a step in the right direction, because it's hopefully something that you can show people like that religion isn't necessarily a negative thing. It's not necessarily a tool of oppression and evil. And then we've talked to Rabbi Rami about his perennial wisdom, and I think there's a lot of value to that, where he says the most important things in all religions are those perennial pieces of wisdom that are common between all religions. So it's not the differences in dogma or ritual that are important. It's the universal truths. And
because he's trying to build more of a community in terms of community.
That's right.
I more and more see the bridges between different religions. There's these pieces of perennial wisdom, and there's these thinkers from all these traditions, and these thinkers are all talking to each other. People, Jewish scholars and Christian scholars and Buddhist monks and everybody, and they're all talking and they're all sharing ideas, and then there's this total disconnect from the scientific world, and you really only have just a handful of thinkers like Sam Harris, who's talking about mindful meditation and a connection to Buddhism, and sort of feeling around that maybe there's something there. He talks about how when some people meditate, they feel a sense of great emptiness, that they lose their sense of self and they realize that there's nothing. And then other people, when they meditate, they feel a great sense of oneness, and they lose their self and they realize that we're all one. And he's kind of leaning towards the oneness right now. And then he had a panel where he was talking to Richard Dawkins, who's a pretty surly, in my experience, utterly determined to not entertain any ideas that anybody other than him is right. But he just scoffs and says, "Oh, meditation's never done anything for me. I don't get anything out of it." And Sam Harris is a neuroscientist, and very much from the observable reality scientific method end of philosophy, but even he's kind of groping around and feeling like maybe there's something else going on here. But I just don't hear a lot of that, and I feel like until you have what amounts to a pretty systematic effort to root out and destroy spirituality, because you have these there's people who were raised in these, highly restrictive religious environments, and they rebelled against it, and they discovered science, and now just religion is just the enemy. And we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, they're missing all the good things that come out of it. And if they miss all the good things, then the result and the society that we're going to create that rejects all of that, every place I look in history where that's been done, it has not turned out well. I mean, you have, the Chinese that were coming in and destroying Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, and, smashing ancient temples and artwork, and just stomping out anything that was considered religion as superstition and poisonous. And I don't think that's good either. So those are just some of the feelings. Like, I feel like there's kind of a big dialogue that's been going on, and it's been pretty poisonous, going back and forth. And I guess the I'm starting to see the signs that there's kind of a bigger dialogue in the religious wing of things between different religions. But the biggest divide I see right now is just between the atheist, scientific-minded people and everyone else. And then, I mean, you have fundamentalists, too, who are over here saying, well, my branded religion is right and everybody else has to die. So you can't reason with the unreasonable, so I'm not sure really how much to worry about that.
Right.
Do you see that kind of dialogue going on, that kind of... The only thing I've been calling is just a dialogue in society. Do you see that going on? Where do you see yourself as a role in that? And do you think, your projects are trying to address that or solve some part of that equation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's kind of where I knew we might be onto something, was when I had friends of mine who are pretty devout atheists say, hey, you know that I'm not Team Jesus, but I'm interested in what you're doing, and I'd love to be a part of it if you'd let me. Like, when those messages started coming in, I thought, okay, they know that I'm a pastor. They know that I care about these certain things, and yet there was a sense of invitation. And to me, I think for people who grew up in really abusive religious systems, like I think it's important to call some of those things what they are, and it's trauma. And I don't know that I have always seen it quite in that light, but I can't blame people at all for running as far as they could the opposite direction. Like, that makes sense to me. If you were raised in a tradition or a system that is like truly toxic, like of course I'm going to try and find the polar opposite of that thing, which is like, even to your point about reasoning with the unreasonable. That's why, like, our chief goal is not reason. Actually, it's not to ultimately get to a point where we're debating different truths or we're arguing for a certain case. Like, I'm pretty unapologetic about, my particular, passion and position. But ultimately, though, we're still of the posture that, if we can invite people to experience these things in the context of community, it's exactly what you were saying, that when we create space for people to just ask whatever questions they have or to air whatever grievances they've had, like in an environment of like true abiding safety, I just think that has a way of changing the human heart in the way that, like, arguing and debating just simply doesn't. And it's been one of the really surprising byproducts of the project, is because we had an original idea to, like, share some thoughts, write some music, kind of be done with it. What we're finding is that, we've tackled themes like suffering and tragedy, and to invite people to articulate, what was it like losing your dad or losing that friend or, experiencing a miscarriage? Like, there's this great commonality that when people read this stuff, they're like, man, I've experienced tragedy like that. And I don't agree with you on all of the finer points of this particular theology, but like this, we have in common. If we can create space for people to share their humanness in that regard, I think that's really significant. And I am seeing a greater receptivity across the board to some of those discussions. You're always going to have people who they're going to swear off meditation. They're going to swear off any organized religion of any kind. They're going to swear. That's always going to be there. But I think you can feel the collective shoulders of everyone lower a little bit when you say, like, oh, no, I'm not trying to convince you to buy anything or to sign on any dotted line. We just want to invite you to be a part of this. Everyone sort of breathes a little easier and like, oh, okay, well, maybe I could dip a toe in those waters. It's been remarkable to see, really, even across the board, even people, who maybe grew up in more fundamental traditional environments, or people who grew up in like pretty esoteric progressive environments. It's incredible to see even those sides of the spectrum. Oftentimes they're my friends, like, engaging in a healthy dialogue. I see that happening, and I think, oh man, there's a lot of hope here. There's to see that kind of where otherwise they maybe never would have actually existed in the same space to even have that conversation. We're creating these environments where, and it's not always this way. Plenty of people have gotten upset by stuff we wrote or stuff we said or didn't. You're going to have that too. The nice thing is, it really truly has been birthed out of this communal effort. So, like, no one's brand is on the line. We're not, we're not on the hook for any particular denomination. You got to make sure to, mention this or tie that up with the bow. Like, we have the freedom to just let people be honest about their journey. And I don't know. I think that I've been really, really blown away by people's interest and willingness to be a part of that. In fact, the people that make the thing happen, or you got this incredible crew that like capture the audio and edit it. You have these songwriters who are writing this stuff. You have people who are writing these narratives. It's all like work. And they keep coming back to me and they'll say things like, man, thank you for letting us be a part of this. I'm like, why are you thanking me? You're the one, you're making it happen. You're creating. And the more that happens, the more I'm just kind of blown away that people are just hungry for some kind of space to explore some of these things, or to even be challenged to like think a little differently about something. And I think the more that you allow people a sort of no strings attached to take part in something, I think the world is really, really, really hungry for that. And I think, in a world that's kind of just going and going and going, and we just sort of go from thing to thing to thing. Like, everyone feels that. I don't know. I don't think it even matters what kind of tradition you come from. We all have experienced kind of the crushing weight of like more and more things, more and more stuff, more and more sense data coming at us. I feel like to some degree, somewhere deep down, almost all of us can resonate with the need to, man, it's important for me to step back, to hit pause, to breathe deeply once in a while, because my life is going so fast. And I think that invitation seems to really resonate with people regardless of their background. And that's been really, really, it's been really honoring. It's been really humbling just to see the way that people have interacted with that.
Going back to something you said previously about being irrational, I really do think that there's a value in that. As an artist, I feel that what artists do is we come from like an emotional space, the irrational space, the feeling space, and then we go back with rationality, and you can really find, I guess, what's true. And does that make sense?
Yeah, there's something I've been thinking about a lot lately is that for hundreds of thousands of years, humans had the bicameral mind, where you had the rational and the irrational, and you had reason and logic and rationality, and then you had, your gods or God and your spiritual experience of the world. And for thousands and thousands of years, that wasn't questioned, and it was really only with the era of Enlightenment science that they defined anything supernatural or anything spiritual as superstition, and established, modern science started, in the 1700s, more or less. That was the first time anybody, and they threw out all the dogma and superstition of the church, but they also threw out a very key component of human, the way humans interacted with the world. So I guess one of the ways I've seen it is if you have a dream or a vision and you have like a spiritual understanding of something that's going on in your life, modern science tells you that is meaningless, and that if you have a dream or a vision and you take it seriously, then you're ill and you need to be treated. And they take medications and drugs, and there's people who for hundreds of thousand years would be considered holy people who are having, prophecies or visions or a direct experience with God. And now they're pathologizing them, and they're using chemicals to, destroy that part of their brain and shut that process down. And the result that you have is that we have a society where it's like half the people are on Ritalin or Adderall, and the other half are on antidepressants or Xanax, and those medications really suppress that irrational side of your mind, that it may not be compatible with performing your role as like a cog in the machine of modern society, but that you were built to have both those aspects of yourself. And, you know,
Right.
we weren't made to be robots, and we weren't,
Right.
you know, for hundreds of thousands of years, we had systems and rituals and mysticism and all that, and furthermore, that if you were having distressing dreams or visions or something, you would go to your spiritual leader, and they would help you interpret those, and that would heal that mental illness. That now we don't heal the thing that's causing the dreams and the distressing visions and all that. We just give you something to make the visions go away. And we don't,
Right.
you know, we freeze people into this, you know, crystal lattice of, you know, permanently being locked in their trauma instead of letting them work through it spiritually, which is, you know, you may scientifically disagree with the concept of spirituality, but humans have always had that. Like, we've always had a
Right.
spiritual understanding of the world. We evolved to think that way. So my roommate's very scientific and doesn't believe in any of this and thinks it's all hocus pocus. And what I was trying to say to him is, whether or not you scientifically believe that anything spiritual is actually happening, handling things through the context of ritual and spirituality actually does help you heal, because that's how you were
Right.
built to heal.
Right.
Whereas suppressing all of that is the opposite. It's like, you know, it's like putting a cast on an arm that you haven't set the bone properly.
That's good.
I think that's interesting what you're talking about with people bringing their art and talking about these issues, because really that's what you're doing when you share a song about, you know, you went through this tragedy, you had this mess in your life, but you saw the beauty in that moment, and you saw the growth, and you saw how you matured spiritually and mentally. And I really think that is what's important about what you're doing, and what we just need more of in the world is people bringing the arts as what they were, which is a very important part of wellness, really.
Yeah.
And I think that's also true in religion. Like, I took history and theology of worship when I went to Judson as well. And I remember we talked a lot about them bringing like the Tizé chanting and just bringing back those type of things into it, because like he was saying, in the age of rationality, the Enlightenment age, they kind of, even in religious circles, they kind of got rid of it. You know, like we need to bring that back. We need to bring back the idea of incense and the way all these and sounds and just the way they all come together to create an experience.
No, I think that's really good, and I think part of what's easy to miss in an age of productivity, right? What's the output? What's the outcome? Which is not insignificant. Obviously, I think that's important. And even with the artists and songwriters specifically, when we ask them, hey, would you write something for this theme specifically? Sometimes there's a little bit of like, oh man, but I don't have anything on that topic. I don't know how I would create something there, but they accept it anyway. And what they often say, you know, on the other end is like, man, thank you for even giving the framework to explore this particular topic, because I don't know that I otherwise would have created a song about this or in this way, which in turn, that song then really speaks to someone else. Like, it's the domino effect of some of that is so interesting to me, and the freedom to not only create for a theme that somebody else asked you to do, but then to also do so for the benefit of the community. Because I think people are, artists in particular, and some are really good at it, but there is a sense of insecurity when it comes to self-promotion. Like, I don't want to keep telling people, hey, we got a new single, we got another album, we got you know, that can feel sometimes self-serving, and, you know, for a lot of artists that feels very foreign. But if you're contributing something to a part of this like greater collection, this bigger dialogue, there's a different posture, it seems, that doesn't feel as self-aggrandizing or self-promoting. It's sort of like, oh man, yeah, we're adding to this really cool, interesting, important conversation, and here's just sort of one note of that orchestra that hopefully kind of moves this thing in some way that actually helps bring some healing and restoration, some language or categories for people that maybe otherwise didn't have them. The benefits to how we've done it so far, like, it's been really wild because most of us have been pretty honest about we don't know what we're doing. Like, we're not sure how to do this or what that's supposed to look like, or, you know, we've sought some advice from people that have given us a lot of really good insight. But what we're creating in a lot of ways is like a modern liturgy. Like, okay, what are some rhythms that we can introduce to help people, whether you're 70 years old or you're 19 and you're just kind of beginning your life, or whatever that is. Do these things actually speak to the commonality of the human experience, and can we actually provide space for both ends of that spectrum to offer some voice to the chorus? And we're finding that by and large the answer is yes. And it feels like maybe some of it's just a little bit of luck, a little bit of timing, a little bit of, you know, Rob Bell talks about, like, we live so much in the world of trouble that people are like hungering for a bass note, you know, sort of like we go, and we're waiting for something just to really like resonate, something to really kind of shake in our chest. And it feels like in a lot of ways that's been people's response to the stuff that we're cultivating and creating. And the, you know, the really beautiful thing is too, specifically like with the written pieces, is that, you know, probably half the people that I ask, you know, they'll say, first they'll say, like, well, I'm not a writer. And I'm like, well, just because you haven't written before doesn't mean you're not a writer. So there's, yeah, I mean, we have, you know, chiropractors and stay-at-home moms and brokers. Like, it's not just a bunch of like quote unquote artists. It's people, some of whom have never actually, no one's ever invited them to actually write down their thoughts, to share it in a creative, poetic way. And I think I get a real kick out of that, because it is, you know, I think that's part of what contributes to our echo chambers, is we just sort of continue with our confirmation bias with people who look, talk, act, think just like us. And that just sort of keeps snowballing on itself. So if you actually can somehow create an environment where people who maybe otherwise wouldn't show up in each other's Facebook streams saying something that's provocative or compelling or intelligent, like I get such great joy. I feel like the more that we do this, the more I see my role as curator. Like, how do we actually bring in these different components? No one wants me singing a song at all. That would be catastrophic. And I don't even desire to do that, because I know that there's so many other more talented, well-versed people to do that. And if I can help connect some of those dots in creating those spaces, man, that just brings me so much joy, because it is helpful. And I think I've been challenged even in my own journey through all of this, you know, like, why? Okay, so when someone said it this way, why does that make me uncomfortable? What is it beneath the surface that makes me want to push back against that? And what are the things kind of click-clacking around, you know, from my brain, from my childhood? And when this person kind of takes this point of contention, what's going on beneath the surface? And it's helping me even be better at, like, taking pause and honest talk about, like, I actually don't really know why I think or feel that. I just always have. It just, even personally, it's just been so enriching for me that it's easy for me to love doing it, because it just brings me such joy to actually be a part of it, you know. And that's been a real gift for me. I
think that part of the reason why you see movements like yours, and I've seen others that are either within the context of a single church or within the context of non-denominational Christianity or interfaith dialogue, that there is this kind of the failings of organized religion over the last however many centuries, and the injustices that arose from the Orthodox prescriptive rule-based systems that were created. And, you know, you had the Council of Nicaea, and they took all these different Christian teachings and they decided what was and wasn't heresy, and they wiped out the sects that were heretical, and they wiped out the teachings that were heretical, and they came up with one system that was, you know, universal, and that was the very, the word Catholic means universal, and that was supposed to be the universal faith. And now you see these same sentiments echoed of wanting to find something that's universal, wanting to find unity. You have the Unity Church, you have interfaith dialogue, you have a desire of religious and spiritual people to create something that doesn't have the same problems that created this oppositional force of this atheist movement, and find a way to remain relevant, a way to remain a part of the human experience. And I guess one of the pitfalls that I fear is that they're going to create a new universal Orthodox dogmatic doctrine that's going to be the real truth, and that in a couple hundred years we're going to have the same situation all over again, because we'll just have created a new system of rules where, kind of a joke, but I see like the whole food plant-based diet is this other gentleman that we interviewed, and I don't know, sustainable energy and, riding your bicycle to work, we're going to come up with these new moral values, and that those are going to become rules, and that, in 300 years, it will be a deadly sin to drive a car powered by fossil fuels. But that will, that when, we're redefining what good is, and we're redefining what the rules should be. And it's all done in the spirit of wanting to come together. But that if we allow it to create just a new system of rules, then we're missing the point, and we'll just repeat the cycle. And in 2,000 years, we'll be back right where we are with a system of old rules that don't work for what we are. So that's a thought that I think about a lot, is that we should be evolving, not repeating the cycle. That we had these teachers, Jesus and Buddha, and we had these people come to us and try and help us evolve, and we turned it into a system of rules and use it to do really horrible stuff to each other for the last couple thousand years. And if we're really going to be learning what we're supposed to be learning, we should be evolving past that cycle and not just repeating it as another cycle.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see that people are starting to have these conversations, but I just worry about them creating a new universal faith that claims that it has the one true everything, and it just becomes another set of rules to compete with everything else that's out there, and go out and brutalize people who don't subscribe to it.
Yeah, I think that fear is justified. I think that's always going to be the natural pull for really dogma and religion of any kind, is to want to hunker down and better unify under what you believe to be ultimate truth and ultimate reality. I think when you speak of like the evolution of consciousness, I think people are becoming more and more savvy, or at the very least open to the possibility that there's nuance they haven't yet discovered. Like I can even think of people in my own life who, 10 years ago were Bible thumping, fire and brimstone, as fundamental as they come. Hearing them over coffee say things like, yeah, I think I might have missed the mark on that one. I might have, like that, never in a million years would I have anticipated that. And that maybe I'm just endlessly hopeful, but I think particularly in the age of technology, with even though the temptation is to become increasingly myopic, because it's easier to sort of pick and choose and curate exactly what your news stream or social circles look like. I think on the flip side of that, you have people who are realizing that their world is not the world, and it's giving way, it seems, at least in some circles, to some pretty important conversations. And I think because of the rise of our connectivity, we're actually able to, have a Skype call with somebody who leads a community that looks way different than ours halfway across the globe. And that, I think, really does have some value. I don't think anyone needs to be convinced that there's still plenty of hate and vitriol in the world. That doesn't seem to be going away either. But I'm encouraged, even in my own small, tiny corner of the earth, people that I don't know that I ever would have anticipated being a part of a project like ours or having conversations like we've had have really assumed a posture of humility, of become more comfortable with some gray, with some mystery, which is where I think like art and poetry have since the beginning of time been kind of the lighthouse and beacon for having those conversations, right? So when someone says, you know, my heart was broken, we know that they don't actually mean that their physical heart was shattered in half, but they've given language and they've given articulation to a thing that we've been feeling. And I think, I don't know, I think we're entering into a new season, at least in the Western Church, where art and creativity isn't just a vehicle by which we actually get to the important stuff, you know, the preaching and teaching of the word, but that we're actually seeing beauty, art, creativity, poetry, movement as important, not even important, central components to just simply being human. And I think the more and more that we can help people better see their roles in that way, like I think at the very least, having honest dialogue about what we don't know, that's huge. That's, you know, even in my role as a pastor, I think traditionally pastor was to be the keeper of all knowledge and truth, and the church was the social central hub of a community. And that's certainly not the case anymore, and probably for good reason. And I think the more that the church in particular can say, you know what, there's a lot that we actually don't know, and we're doing it together. We're not doing it in a vacuum, and we're going to invite people to be a part of that dialogue. I think that's a compelling vision for me. That's an interesting proposition that I'm finding more and more people are at least open to dipping a toe into those waters, and I want to be a part of that. I think that's a really shift in culture, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be, you know, just one person who's hopefully safe spaces, because I think without safe spaces, there's never going to be progress. We don't make it anywhere without actually carving out arenas and conversations where people can actually truly own whatever it is that they're thinking or feeling. And I think, regardless of whatever end of the spectrum people land on, it's important that we're doing that, and it seems like people are responding, which is really, really neat.
That term "safe space," I've heard that. This is something that came upon the scene or after I left the academic world, but you hear that term a lot on the internet, and it's used often pretty pejoratively, that people are, you know, so delicate now they can't handle anything that offends them, and that you need this safe space where they can go and not be challenged by anything that conflicts with their worldview. But I think it's really kind of the opposite, that you need a safe space carved out where people can be safe expressing their views no matter what they are, and then you can discuss them and have a dialogue with each other, and it's not about finding offense. That's another thing Sam Harris brought up recently that I really liked, is that I forget exactly how he put it, but he said that if you aren't interested in hearing me explain myself and my position, if something I say offends you and you aren't interested in hearing me explain myself so as to clarify, you know, what I'm saying, and you think that by what you've already heard, you know what I think better than I know what I think, then you're not really being intellectually honest, and you aren't really interested in building any kind of dialogue or consensus or anything. That he calls such people outrage junkies, where they're not really interested in getting along or in finding common ground. What they're interested in is finding something where they can go, aha, I got you. You said such and such, and that means you think such and such, and that means you're a horrible, horrible person, and now you're the enemy. And that's kind of exactly the opposite from what we need. What we need to give each other as much time and space as we can to, because I think that the more you get to know somebody and the more you actually hear where they're coming from, the more commonality, and the more you'll realize they're actually kind of saying the same thing you are. And I really see that a lot between spiritual people, that, you know, you can take an imam and a rabbi and a priest, and they will sit there, and at first it seems like they're arguing, but if you let them talk through it all, that at the end of the conversation, you'll realize they're all, like Rabbi Rami's perennial wisdom, they're all kind of saying the same thing, and they're kind of taking different paths to get to the same point. And at the end of the story, they have this vision of what life would be like if we were all living in peace and happiness with our families and our communities, and they all want that same end result. And it just takes a while for them to all catch up and be on the same page and realize that this concept is really equivalent to this concept, and that they're really all seeking the same goal. And so, yeah, I really appreciate the idea of like having a safe space as someplace where you can go to feel safe. I am concerned. There's with the internet troll phenomena, there's some people who I don't think they realize just how or care just how delicate this process it is, and how much is at stake, and for whatever reason they don't care, and they just like to smash things that other people are building because they just like the sheer hedonistic joy of just destroying things. But I think that there's a lot of that, particularly on the internet, you're trying to have some kind of very delicate diplomatic effort between groups that have traditionally killed each other, and you have some internet troll who, I basically see them as just emotionally 10-year-olds, and they don't understand that coming in and
terrorists.
Yeah, it is really like terrorism, like, because there's, I don't think I'm overstating it to say that this is, a matter of life and death as far as working through these things as a civilization, and anybody who's throwing gasoline on the fires of strife between these different sects is really walking a dangerous line. That look at this. You look at the situation in the Middle East, or you look at the situation between India and Pakistan. These are very tenuous, very dangerous situations, and the geopolitical ramifications of not finding some kind of common ground are really, really horrible. And I think anybody who's expending effort to derail efforts at finding common ground is really dangerous. Like, and I don't think I'm understating that. I think that's a danger to humanity and life itself. That's something that we really should not be tolerating now. And I don't know exactly how it can be handled or how it can be addressed, but that's one thing that I worry about a lot is that these people are very immature and they don't understand or care, or for whatever reason they would just as soon disrupt that process just for their own entertainment, and that's really scary to me.
I think that's justifiably scary too, and I think one of the things Brene Brown says a lot that I really appreciate. She says people are hard to hate up close, so lean in. I think for me, I'm not naive enough to think like, oh, we just got to create a space. People come, everyone's healed, it goes well. Like there's some people just want to see the world burn, right? I realize that doesn't go away. I've also, in my particular line of work, I've enough times seen people absolutely radically transformed when they experience the no strings attached type of love of a community, when they actually feel known and seen and heard, like that can change a life, I think. And obviously, well, I've gotten run through the mud. I've gotten my teeth kicked in, certainly by taking a risk on someone. They were really just interested in dismantling the whole thing. But more times than I can count, though, I think it's why I keep doing it, to be honest. Like, maybe I'm just endlessly hopeful. Maybe I'm stupidly optimistic. I just feel like that component's always going to be there, and it can be really devastating, at the very least, really distracting, to what I think a lot of people are trying to actually accomplish. But I mean, I've seen too many people when it would have been easier to just sort of stiff arm them and categorize them as some sort of troll, to pursue them in a way that actually gives them dignity, look them in the eye and say, listen, I know that for whatever reason, you think this is the best way forward. And I imagine there's probably layers upon layers of rationale for why this is happening, but to know that you're loved and you're seen as well. And I've seen that conversation change the human heart over and over and over again. And I think there's just a lot of power in that. And it very rarely is like a Hallmark movie, it just takes one conversation and they change their ways. But like over time and over, I've been in full-time ministry for, 13 years or whatever. And I think to have experienced that enough times now to still have hope that's the best way forward, that to continue to love despite ridicule, to continue to model patience in space when everything around you seems to be crushing it. That is one of the hardest avenues of perseverance that I've ever known, and I think maybe the most benefit. And I think you're right in feeling that tension. But I'm always endlessly fascinated by the deeper question of what is it that's driving that engine for people to behave the way that they do. If someone loses their mind on, some random political post on Facebook, like what is the thing behind the thing, the layer beneath the layer that is leading a grown man to use that kind of language, or a grown woman to call someone those names? There's something else going on there. And when I feel the desire to sort of distance myself, I always want to be mindful to at least ask the question, what would happen if I actually leaned in instead of ran away? And, it doesn't always go as planned, but there's been a lot of moments and encounters where I felt this space, this community was as much for that person as it was for anybody. And it's pretty remarkable to see.
I really love that quote about leaning in from Brene Brown.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, with your social media, for example, people can follow Beauty in the Comma on Facebook and join that community. Like, the idea that you have these communities in social media that are designed to promote positive or really reflective attitudes is a way to counteract that, I think. You have to deliberately create community.
One reason why such efforts at creating unity or creating meaning or creating healing are attacked is that there's a very hard real world market in that dysfunction, that if you are trying to heal people and you're trying to give people a solution to that pain that doesn't involve purchasing a chemical that's going to alleviate that pain, that you're undermining their profitability in one way or another.
Right.
And by giving them an alternative to organized religion, it's the same thing. You have organized religion, you have the pharmaceutical industry, you have drug cartels, and these are all organizations with tremendous resources who, if you're giving them some kind of free, open source thing, a solution where you're trying to have this dialogue and you're trying to help people heal and grow, you're undermining the foundation of a billion-dollar industries. And I think that's one of the reasons why you have these arsonists come in and firebomb, either literally or metaphorically, your efforts. Is that the one thing they really don't want people to do is realize just how that meaning and love and community are free. That it's not something you have to pay for. It's not something that you need to subscribe to, and it's not a pill that you can take.
That goes back to the pre-Reformation, doesn't it?
Right.
Well, this podcast is going to be released around the time of Lent this year, which is on Valentine's Day, isn't it?
Nice.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you just to tell us about what you're doing for Lent this year with Beauty in the Common, and you have like a book and the photo challenges. Do you want to tell our listeners about that?
Sure. Yeah. What we have done for Lent in particular because, I mean, I guess based on your particular tradition, Lent is, in a lot of ways, it's a journey to Easter. But before Easter, it's the cross. And I think one of the things that we've done that it seems really simple, but we found that people really resonate with, is actually creating sort of just like a daily challenge to see or express a particular word that day. And so sometimes it's, someone sharing it on social media with the hashtag Beauty in the Common. Others is people, they don't share any of it online. It's just a thing that they do with their family, but we'll create like to sort of offer a daily focus, or something to kind of be mindful of that day. And what we found is, like, traditionally, a lot of mindfulness focuses solely on things that you would probably put in the category of positive, but I think that's only half the story. I think part of being fully alive in our world isn't just that the highs are higher, but that we also like really truly enter into one another's grief as well. And I have a particular bent that thinks we just don't do that very well as a culture. We jump right to celebration, and even the way that we do a lot of, modern funerals, it's try to make the person look as good as possible, because I think a lot of times we just don't know what to do with our grief. And I think, so if we can better be mindful not only of that which is beautiful or kind or joyful in the world, but also how are we mindful of sorrow or grief or sadness or pain. And so we usually create some kind of challenge or some kind of calendar for the season of Lent. And it's interesting because some people practice Lent religiously still. Some people have walked away from those faiths long ago, but still like to participate in some sort of liturgy, some sort of practice. And it is a pretty, I think it's a unique take on it, and people enjoy not only doing it, but doing it and knowing other people doing it as well. And it's been interesting just to see the way that people have resonated with this thing that really was not something central to what we thought this would be about. And it's become a really cool kind of part of the calendar. And then in April, so part of what we're doing different for 2018 is I mentioned the very first year of the project, we recorded all of the artists in one sort of crazy breakneck day, 8 a.m. to midnight. And then in 2017, it was very, very different. And we did, kind of one or two artists at a time. And we drove all over the place and into the city and up and south and whatever. And it was really neat because we got to, kind of shoot in a bunch of different locations, but that's just a ton of bandwidth for, an amazing team that is volunteering the time. So what we're doing for 2018 is we're going to host two live recording events, because what we've kind of been missing is inviting people to actually be a part of the process before it's ever even, edited and posted. So we had our first one in November in Elgin, which was a riot. We did our 6 artists, and we had food, and we just invited people to the behind the scenes portion of it. And then on April 7th, we'll be hosting the second half of the year, the last 6 remaining artists for 2018. So that location has not been announced yet, but April 7th, if you're around Chicagoland and you want to be a part of the live filming, you can go to the Beauty in the Common Facebook page. You can go to thecommonyear.com and subscribe to the email list. You can go to beautyinthecommon.com and get updates there as well. But we're just interested in helping create more physical spaces for this type of exploration, this kind of dialogue. And it's been neat just to see how big a difference that makes. It's obviously more work and effort to actually like host a live event versus just recording someone in the studio. But it's just so rich to see the different reactions of people and to hear some of the stories in real time about like what their experiences was like and how we can do it better. And so that's how we're tackling 2018. So that'll be April 7th out here in the Chicagoland area.
Well, it's been great talk. Is there any other projects or anything that you're involved with or that you'd like to mention besides Beauty in the Commons you'd like to tell our listeners about? Well,
now that you mention it, my wife has started a really cool project called Common Mission Women, and that's at commonmissionwomen.com. And what she's been doing is really beautiful. She's just finding women who are doing really like courageous and creative things in the world, and she interviews them and sort of highlights their story and what they're doing, and whatever their context. So it's, business women and people who are working in photography or the arts or tactiles or whatever it is. She has such a wonderful heart for women in particular, and wants to give bigger voice, larger platform to the women that are just creating and doing cool things in the world. So that's her project, commonmissionwomen.com, and she's been doing a lot of really neat stuff with that. So I definitely recommend that.
Yeah, that's something Rabbi Rami mentioned, is a return of the sacred feminine, and how he felt like that was an important part of balancing the kind of spiritual equation in the world, is giving that aspect more of a voice. So that's cool to hear about.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Ian, for coming on the Conscious Community Podcast.
Yeah, we've been meaning to come out there and check out your services too. So thanks so much for coming on, and we'll try and get out there and check out one of your services one of these Sundays.
Hey, my pleasure, man. We would love to have you guys.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Hey, thanks. You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Conscious Community Podcast. If you'd like more information about sponsoring this podcast or advertising with Conscious Community Magazine, in print or online, please email me at spencer@consciouscommunitymagazine.com. That's SPENCER, or call 630-492-0831.